Welcome to Money Matters TV and our segment called Growth Stories, where we hear from entrepreneurs and advisors who share secrets and advice on what business owners need to know to grow. I'm your host, Mike Verrill, Managing Director with Sharp Financial. The problem for business owners is fractured business and personal financial advice. The solution is our unique integrated financial management approach. We've unified accounting and tax, business advisory, wealth management, investment banking, and family office services to maximize value and create unique outcomes and success for business owners and their families and help them achieve extraordinary things. From time to time, issues involving life sciences, healthcare, technology companies may be discussed in the show. Those discussions should not be viewed as financial advice. Moreover, since the show is pre-recorded and shown at a later date, some of those conversations may no longer be relevant. It's always wise to seek advice from your financial advisor before entering into any financial transaction. We have a great guest today. In my opinion, somebody who would fits the true definition of an entrepreneur. He grew up in a family business, and he's constantly starting and growing businesses. I'm looking forward to learning more and digging in. But before we do that and meet our guest, we have a question from one of our viewers. Dan Jansen from Philadelphia would like to know, when looking for a financial CPA firm, what should you look for as a business person to get the very best? Thanks for the question, Dan. As a business owner, there's a couple of different things, but I'll break it down into one typical scenario. Most of the business owners own businesses that are called pass-through entities, where the tax liability for the business flows through to your personal return. So the first thing you want to do is find an accountant who can help you strategize and plan around your personal and business balance sheets. It's also good to ask questions to determine whether they've worked with firms that are similar size. Industry experience is helpful but not necessary. And understand what the team that you'll be working with will look like. Also, ask if they offer any other services. Our firm offers personal wealth management and business advisory in addition to strong accounting and tax support. Hopefully that was helpful, Dan. It's always great to hear from our viewers, and to submit for a future episode, here's how to send your questions to Money Matters TV.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, MONEY, -matters, MATTERS, TV.com.
As I mentioned in the intro, our guest today is a lifelong entrepreneur, somebody I've known for many years. So I'm very excited to welcome to Growth Stories, Phil Kramer, CEO of Victory 4PL. Hey, Phil, how are you? Thanks for joining me on the show.
How are you, Mike? It's good to be with you. I've been looking forward to doing this with you.
Awesome. So before we dig in and learn about your background and some of the other things we discussed talking about, can you give us an overview of Victory 4PL and kind of what you're doing and the types of customers you work with?
Sure. Victory 4PL is what's considered a fourth-party logistics company. And so what that means is we are an aggregator of outsourced logistics services, both of services that we provide, as well as the services of partners that we have, our back-end partners that we've partnered with, all in the hopes of and the goals of creating an end-to-end seamless supply chain for our customers. We typically work specifically in the outsourced elements of supply chain. So things like warehousing, e-commerce, fulfillment, and all types of domestic and global transportation. We typically work with manufacturers, distributors, and retailers in order to help them optimize those elements of their supply chain.
Well, that's awesome. I know you've got a long background in logistics, and we'll dig into that. So that's great. Congratulations. Exciting to hear things are going well. So I know we mentioned you worked in a family business, third generation in a family business, which is kind of rare. A lot of businesses don't make it to the third generation. So love to hear some stories about the early days of working in the family business. Where did it start? What was it like in the first generation, the second generation, and what were the kind of things you did? And give us a little color around that. It'd be great to hear.
Sure. What's really interesting is my earliest memories, Mike, really involved climbing around cases in a warehouse and building forts and things like that. So my memories go way back to my childhood as I grew up in a multi-generational business. My grandfather started the Victory Candy Company in, we think, 1917, 1918. And he basically serviced, it was kind of like a jobber type of wholesale distributor where they serviced fountain soda type of stores, small independent pharmacies, which was the lay of the land, small grocery stores, and really, I guess, the early stages of what convenience stores came to be. Um, he ran that business and ultimately did until he passed away, which was in the 70s. But my dad got involved in the business in the 50s, the late 50s. And even before that, Victory Candy Company became the Victory Candy and Tobacco Company. That was in the late 30s. And then my dad took over the business. Um, he got involved in the business, took it over in the 60s, but ultimately got involved in during the late 50s. And so, um, then I think really it was then until I would say it was 1984, Victory Candy and Tobacco Company became the Victory Wholesalers. And it really involved the addition of a much deeper grocery line. And that in just kind of dictated as the market changed and evolved, where the convenience store became more than just a spot to pick up a drink. There were different things like groceries and so forth that we were able to supply, and it opened up the type of clients that we can work with, could have worked with as well.
Interesting, yeah. So, what I know you had a childhood experience and climbing around, and it was your own personal playground a little bit. But what were some of the first jobs you had when you got actually involved in working in the business?
Yeah, so the playing around didn't last all.
Get to work, Phil.
I got put to work relatively quick. I guess my earliest memories, would be, these summer stints that I did as a youngster. I guess, the 12, 13-year-old range. And really what it involved at that point was just stocking shelves, refilling areas, unloading trucks. I mean, my dad told me to show up for work with two t-shirts because by halftime I was going to need the change. Um, and so, that's my earliest memories. And then, it kind of evolved by the time I was 16, again, doing these summer stints. By the time I was 16, it became a full-time summer stint, not like a 2 or 3 week period, but the full entire summer. And, my fondest memories and what I vividly remember is, about half the time I was working as a driver, because as I had my driver's license, I could drive. So I remember driving truck and delivering. And then on the days where I wasn't doing that, I had a suit on with a tie and I was out selling. And we had routes. And so it was a combination of servicing existing accounts and working on new possibilities and opportunities within certain geographical areas. And so I was the guy who covered for vacations. And so if you were on vacation, I was the guy who covered for you, no matter what you did.
Learning that hustle skill set that every entrepreneur needs early on, right?
Yeah, and I didn't even know I was in training at the time.
That's great. How did the business evolve, and kind of how were you? Did you after school, like after you got out of school? And I know you went to Temple. We met at Temple. Did you work in the business after that, or had the business been sold by then? What was the kind of the back end?
I worked in the business before, during, and after my days at Temple. I finally remember, days where, we all know Johnson Hall, but there were days where I got dressed up and I went out and worked on developing new accounts while I was at school. Um, and I didn't do that like I did that with some level of consistency. Obviously, school came first, but it was really interesting that I kept it up. It was in 1994 into 1995 and where the business was sold. And the evolution was is, that 1984 to 85 timeframe where we became Victory Wholesalers. Not only did that include an expansion of our product line, but it also involved moving to a new facility that allowed us to operate in a way that we hadn't been able, a much more automated, much more wide open, highly conveyorized and so forth. So it allowed us to operate in a way that we hadn't before that. So, we had, the opportunity and consolidation in that particular space, has kind of worked its way through. There are very few players in that space that we were in before, but we were purchased in '95, and then from that point, I became a consultant for the organization that bought it. So there was it was about a 2.5 year transition period where I gave my efforts towards being able to roll this business into the company that purchased us.
Gotcha. What are some of the lessons and skills that you feel like you've brought forward for that? I mean, that's a tremendous experience, right? Have so much responsibility and working closely with your dad and growing and building a business and then going through the modernization of it, right? I mean, that's so often what some of the things are that you take business owners through today because it's still happening in industries, right? So, what are some of the skills and experience that you pulled forward that you still rely on today?
Well, if we want to go back to the early days, just as an example, one of the things that, I think has changed very much in today's time is that I had a hard time and I had to work really hard to be taken seriously. And it wasn't due to the way I act or the way I conducted myself, is actually the way I conducted myself that kind of helped me overcome that. But one of the things, that I learned early on is that, in the day and age where, I was, 16, 17, 18, we were living in a time where, it was almost unexpected that someone of that age would have any type of, understanding of business or any level of skill set that would achieve any level of success within a business. And so I found it really difficult to be taken serious. And so I had to work twice as hard to make sure the words came out of my mouth and what I was saying and when I was saying it was appropriate. So that was, kind of the early part of your question kind of caught me in that direction. But, things that I've learned along the way is that, while you have to have a plan, you have to have a plan for everything you do, and you have to have the vision in order to make that plan, and you have to have the skill in order to get to that, to that goal or whatever it may be. But I think you have to have patience. Family businesses are unique in their nature and how they operate. There's dynamics within a family business that are, you know, they're very different and unique to each family business. But the fact that it falls in the silo of a family business, certainly, there are things that, I guess there's things that my dad did to me that you're not even allowed to do. So there's learning experience that comes with it. I think
Treating
there's
you
an
like
800
an
number now.
employee,
You'll
right?
call if something like that happens to you.
Yeah, yeah. And that employee employer relationship more than father and son, right? Some tough
Yeah,
love,
well,
I'm sure.
it's the father and son relationship shoved into the employer employee,
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. It's I'm sure that's been a great experience for you to lean back on. So, take us. You'd worked some consulting with the buyer, and you had your experience in logistics. What did you do with that? What was kind of the I know we've talked before. Like you're always kind of got new ideas, and so I'm sure as a consultant for somebody else, you're getting antsy and thinking about what you're going to do next. So, kind of take us through that.
Happened was is that I didn't have to think terribly long. I got recruited after I was able to move on from the consulting, and I did some additional consulting to supplement what I was doing because as the 2.5 years went on, my responsibilities lessened as that time went on. So there were opportunities. And being able to help other businesses with what I knew that I was able to do during that time. But ultimately, I didn't have to think terribly long about it because I ended up working for Cardinal Health as a director of operations for Lehigh Valley facility, one of their Lehigh Valley facilities. And so, that was a project that I took on and traveled back and forth each day up to Lehigh Valley, which was interesting. But again, now being able to take what I understood in a family business from a wholesale distribution perspective, and then take that to a Fortune X organization like Cardinal, that was certainly a super opportunity for me to both hone my skills in how larger corporations work, but also a much larger workforce. I think I probably had somewhere, I think 85, somewhere like that, people that I was responsible for.
Wow, what was a contrast like that coming out of a family business now working for a one of the world's largest pharmaceutical distributors, right? Like that must have been a huge culture change, and
Step over you, but you find out what having resources is like versus not having resources. That's one of the things.
that's a good
But you
thing,
also
right?
but you also find out about the layers of bureaucracy that don't necessarily need to exist in a lean organization or an operation.
Hmm. So, how did you take that experience and kind of go on to the next thing? I mean, entrepreneurs typically can only work for big companies for a period of time before they get restless. So, what was the next step for you?
A matter of restless, and they also were going to close my facility and wanted to move me to corporate in Dublin, Ohio, which
Okay.
wasn't going to happen. And so, so ultimately, one of the things that I thought was a natural progression for me is to get involved in third party logistics. And so, third party logistics is a widely used term. It kind of comes in the asset column and some in the non asset column. And without going too far in the weeds about a 3PL, I did go down the route of doing that, and I did it initially as a consultant, and then ultimately I did it. I helped a company establish a division, third party logistics division, and then ultimately I started what's called uh, V2 Logistics, and that was an asset based um, transportation uh, company that did what we did was is we did expedited freight both in the LTL world, which is less than truckload, and the truckload world, which is full truckload, within a 200-mile radius of the Philadelphia area. And so that, I worked on growing that business for 4 years, about 4.5 years actually, when, the economy took a hard turn left in the '07 and '08 timeframe. I lost a significant part of my business, but I hadn't lost any clients. And so that kind of took the handwriting on the wall as an opportunity, and I still had the opportunity to sell my clients, and that's what I did. But that's a hard 4 years as an asset based trucking company. I mean, all of the things that come with that, from your staffing woes to your oversight responsibilities with state and government, to tremendous amount of insurance, and then just stuff that you have to worry about, like tires and people running into things. And
Yeah, I think I recall a story talking to you at one point. A truck got stuck under a bridge leaving New York or something.
than that, Mike, it didn't get stuck under the bridge. It actually separated from the tractor on the Verrazano Narrows
Oh,
Bridge.
jeez.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, it literally came detached, and it had time sensitive load on it, and yeah, that there's a whole story behind that. But we did get it where it needed to go. It was thousands of dollars to get it out of Port Authority, the hands of the Port Authority, and we used multiple dispatchers and any technology we had at the time to figure out with lights and how the fastest way to get to where we needed to go to make that happen. Sometimes you move a load that has a value to a certain point, and if you miss that, it then has zero value after that.
Right.
It happened to be one of those. So yeah,
Small window.
the asset side of part of the business, it's hard, and you've got to have good people, you've got to have scale, and you've got to have a great deal of capital behind you as well.
So is that when you kind of realize that focusing on the asset light side of the business was where you wanted to kind of grow your next opportunity?
Yeah, so I did better than asset light. I went no asset, and so I went
Hmm.
to on the 3PL side of the business as a non-asset service provider. And so what I did was is I took a position with a company at the time. After I sold my company, I took a position with a company as a business development rep specialist, and I wanted to make sure that I could hone my skills on the non-asset side of the business. And so while I certainly knew all the nuts and bolts and like literally did it and have been really doing it my entire career, it was from a different perspective. It was from a different angle that I was able to see that. And in you and I, we've had conversations recently where you said, what about a mentor? Have you had a mentor? And you kind of made me think about it because you think of a mentor as somebody you take at the very beginning of your career, somebody that's going to help you through some of those hard early 20s years that we all go through trying to navigate our way. But it wasn't actually until I took this position after I sold my company that I met someone within the company that provided me, I call him my mentor, and he laughs every time I say it to the day because he said, I learned so much from you. But the fact is I did take this mentor on while I was at this job. And during that, I had the opportunity to hear things and see things that I already knew, but I saw them in a combination of ways or a presentation and a structure in its way that just made my light bulb kind of just click. And from that point, we've taken non-asset based 3PL really to the next level, really doing a lot of this stuff before 4PL was even, it was a term that Accenture coined in the 80s and trademarked it, but it was something that, what we like to do. And so, what that involves is it involves taking a holistic approach with our clients. It's making sure that we look at all of the elements of their outsourced supply chain to provide a solution across the entire board. How do we get these areas to work with each other? How do we get the technology to incorporate all of these under one platforms? And ultimately, how do we get the leverage? How do you manage a spend in one area of your business to get you a better deal on another area of your spend? And that's what
Hmm.
we focus on. We create win-win situations.
Gotcha. Um, when we talk about entrepreneurs, and part of being an entrepreneur is being a visionary and looking to always create. What are some of the things that you're thinking about or looking at now when you think about what's next for logistics or other markets you might be looking at?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that I'm working on now is I've got another entity, another business called the Content Warehouse. And the Content Warehouse is a video production company that specializes in B2B marketing, helping both the companies and the marketing companies they work with create the video they need to accomplish their marketing goals. And so I always, one of the things that I've always believed in is the opportunity to tell a story with video. And so, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to start this business, and we enjoy working on it. I have a business partner that I work with on this, and um, it's actually very complementary to his business. But it's something that I believe in. I think video is king. And so we want to become and have become in many ways a competitively cost solution for video production and accomplishing your marketing goals.
Hmm. Awesome. What you know, right? Um, uh, Obviously, a lot of experiences and different aspects of being in a big company, being in a family business, starting your own business and growing it, and taking it to the point where you sell. Like, what are some of the things or advice that you pass on to other folks who are, maybe they have the entrepreneurial bug or they're an entrepreneur and they're trying to figure out like, how do you stay focused and continue? Because it's not always easy, right? It can be a grind and it can feel lonely at sometimes. So, what are some of the advice you give to entrepreneurs that are kind of going through that phase?
I mean, listen, you kind of nailed it in your description in your question. There's a lot of things that will, there are times during this journey where you will, think you know where you're going, and you end up not necessarily being exactly where you end up. Um, it's I highly recommend that, as much planning as you possibly can. I think you have the expectation that things take time to build. The expression, they say Rome wasn't built in a day, and businesses don't get built in a day. They take a long time, and they take relationships. It's relationships with employees, understanding that the people that work for you are really your most important assets, because without that team, you're not able to do it by yourself. We all know that. None of us can. And so
Right.
I think that's really important. I think you have to make sure you understand that you're going to have setbacks. You're going to have levels of disappointment that come. You're going to have unexpected things that happen, and you have to stay on track. You have to, yeah, you have to stay on the track and the plan that you created for yourself. Um, and then I would also say is, don't let people, and it's kind of cliche because everyone says this, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. But often, if you've got an idea that's outside, what people's understanding of that thing may be, you may describe that to them, and they go, well, I don't see how you would ever do that, or that's not something I think you should do, or things along that line. So making sure that you understand that, staying true to your ideas, but at the same time, I think having a network of peers, like one of the things that you just mentioned, Mike, which is you feel like you're kind of out there on your own sometimes. Well, the
Right.
reason is that, you know, not everybody in your circle, in your world circle, really understands the level of dedication it takes, the amount of disappointment that you'll have to overcome, various setbacks along the way. They don't know that, and without someone to share it with, I think it's a hard road to be on. Now, now in today's day and age, it's certainly easier to connect with people. It's easier to be a part of groups that are not necessarily in your local area. So being a part of entrepreneur groups, being able to talk to other entrepreneurs is key. It's something that helps me now, that helps me accelerate even the new things I'm working on now, that I wish I had that. And making sure you don't put yourself in that position where you feel like, hey, I'm on an island. Nobody really
Right.
understands my pain or what I'm going through. And if you put yourself with a good peer group, a group of folks that are going through that understand that, you will be much better off.
Yeah, that's awesome. So planning takes time, right? Connect with peers, with other supports group. Don't do it alone, and value your employees for the asset that they are. That's great. Thanks, Phil. This has been wonderful. I really appreciate getting the chance to sit down and talk with you. Um, to watch the next show, we've got a guest, Beth Wilson, will join us. She's the president of Wilson Business Services. And as a reminder, you can download the podcast from iTunes, Stitcher, as well as see the program on your YouTube channel, money-matterstv.com. Thank you for joining us for Growth Stories.